Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, JDC family, and welcome to the third episode of Let's Talk series, where I'm going to show you guys how to rust and dust on the cheap for your builds. These packages right here were sent out yesterday to the Flying Valiant, Diecast Pirate, and Outlaw Speed Shop. Look out for those unboxing videos coming up within the next couple days, and hope this video brings you guys value for anybody that's new in the hobby and hasn't really conquered the rust effect, or doesn't have, expensive paints. Basically, what I'm showing you here is the things that you're going to need. $5 helping hands from Harbor Freight, a casting that should cost you $1 at the store, if not less if you get it somewhere else. Apple barrel paints, 50 cents a pot, right? You're going to look at light mocha, chestnut, brown oxide, apricot, and flamenco red. These are the 5 paints that you can get the effect that I'm going to show you here for $2.50. Now, you can switch up the colors as much as you want, make it your own, right? And then this is just a dollar store paint dish that I got from the Dollar Tree, a paper towel, and a old brush that I had left over from a dollar store pack, right? And I actually, this brush is probably 6 months old, and I use it for a lot of different things. So don't feel like you have to throw out your brushes when they're all beat up. They actually come in really nice when you want to do a stippling effect, which is what I'm going to show you here. So what I do is I start off by soaking the brush in water, make sure that it's got some flexibility to it, and then I dry it off with the paper towel, right? To just get all the excess water off of the bristles, right? So now I start off with the darkest brown that I want to use, which in this case is brown oxide. So basically what you want to do is make rust. Now this is what we're going to start off doing, is making rust. So what I do is I soak the tip of the brush, and I dab off most of the paint that's left on it, so that when you put it on the casting, it doesn't just puddle, right? You want it to have a stippled effect, so it kind of spreads the bristles as it hits the casting, and it leaves like a sponge effect. And you can actually use a sponge in this step. I just find it easier to use this brush for this whole process, and for the purpose of this video, it was the easiest way to do it, right? So now I'm just going in and I'm dabbing away on the places that I think that rust might have formed. And after looking at pictures, over the last couple months, I've seen that most cars that rust on the top of the car rust center out, right? And then on the edges of where the fenders meet the top of the body line, and the upper half of the door, and usually the bottom half of the doors and fenders would be more like rot, which isn't something that I'm going to cover here. This is the basic how to rust and dust your cars, for whether it's Gaslands or you want to make like a patina type of look or whatever, and this is not going to be the best effect that you can achieve in this realm of rust, right? Or any of that. It's just the easiest way to do it, in my opinion, and the cheapest way to do it, right? For beginners. So this is something perfect for Gaslands cars. If you guys want to build Gaslands cars, you're just getting into it, this is the way to go. For under $10, you're set up, you're good to go. You got a car on the table that night, and you're good to go, right? So basically what I did was I went in with the brown oxide, and then I went in with chestnut, which is a little bit of a lighter color, and then and you don't actually have to do that. Oh, chestnut is here. Okay, so I didn't go in with the chestnut yet. So I just pour a little bit of chestnut, which is a little bit of a lighter color, just to give it a little bit of contrast. And mix it up a little bit, because rust isn't uniform. It's not uniform. There's so many different colors in there, and it can be very hard to achieve a realistic look, but we're doing our best with what we have here, right? So if you add a little bit of different color here and there, it breaks it up a little bit, and after the final steps are done, it's really going to pop on certain areas. So you just want to do the best with what you got. So we go in with the chestnut, we dab it a little bit. The first layer of the brown oxide, you want to make it your heaviest coat, right? And then the colors that you add onto that, like moving forward, you're gonna back off in each step, right? A little bit less, until the last step where it's just like a little tiny bit, because you're just adding accent color, right? It's just accent color at that point. And you'll see that I actually go back in after all is said and done with the heavier brown to kind of dumb down the color and make it blend a little bit better. But you'll see what's coming up. So now the chestnut is done. Usually you want to wait between steps, between colors, and let it dry. But for the purpose of the video, I just wanted to hammer down. So now this is apricot, which is an orange color. You could use any orange color. This is more of a yellowish orange. And I'm just like, going in, like I said, adding different featured colors to the rust, because if you ever look at rust, it's got oranges, it's got browns, it's got reds, some of it's got like greens and blues, and depending on how the paint oxidized with the environment, it really does some weird kind of stuff, so for the purpose of this video, again, this is what we did. And if you go too heavy with it, you can go in with the paper towel like I did just now and kind of dab it off a little bit. It doesn't fix any mistakes that you made, but one of the great things about rusting cars and dusting cars is a mistake isn't going to stand out, and you can fix it very easily. So between each layer of color, though, I put the brush back into the water, and I actually just run the edge, and I kind of like spin the brush on the side of the cup, and it allows all the paint that's trapped inside the bristles to escape. And you just want to do that until you don't see any more paint coming off the brush, and then dry it off with the paper towel, and it's good to go for the next step. Because I'm using a paint dish, I don't have to worry about contaminating pots. So it's not so crucial to get all the paint off the brush. But now we go in with the flamenco red, and like I said, I'm just accenting at this point. This is just accenting the rust. You don't want to use this very heavily, because you don't want to, unless red colored rust is what you're going for as like a base coat, you don't want to put too much of this on there. It's just to give it a little bit of realistic variety, if you want to call it that, right? So basically that's it. We go in with the red, we give it the accent, and then I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, usually I would go in with a wash at this point, but because I'm not using washes and I'm just showing you guys how to do this as a starter, I end up adapting to it to what I'm doing, and I'll show you in a second. But basically what I'm doing here is I'm going back in with brown oxide, which is the darker of the browns that I started with, and I'm just dabbing over all of that, kind of dumb it down, bring the color down, make it blend a little bit better, and don't allow the brighter colors to just pop out as paintbrush marks, right? So you want to just blend it all together. There's going to be certain areas where you want it to stick out, but like I said, this is a basic starter kit kind of rust and dust job, right? So at this point, we just went back in with the brown oxide. I did cut the camera at some point in time to let it dry a little bit, because you really want to let this dry before you go back in and start dusting, because when you dust, you dry brush, and if the casting is wet, then it doesn't work right. So basically what you see here is because I didn't have a wash, I took some of the water out of the cup and I dropped it into the edge of that puddle of brown oxide, I dropped it into the edge and I dragged some off. Now, people do use a wet palette, and that'll probably work out a lot better in this situation if you're trying to make a homemade wash in your palette. You could also use a souffle cup, like the plastic ones you get from the Chinese place or whatever, and just mix water and paint in there, and you know, mix it up until you get the right consistency that you want. But I just dragged a little bit of paint off. I put like 2 or 3 brushfuls of water in there, and I just layer over the whole car. This way it brings the untouched parts down a little bit, because now primer gray is a bit of a brighter color, right, compared to the brown. So you want to bring it down a little bit and blend in, right? Because if rust formed on the car, it's not, the rest of the parts of the car isn't going to look brand new, right? So you want to bring it down a little bit. So that's what I did. I went over the whole casting with a ghetto homemade wash that I used inside of the paint dish. And, for what it is, it works. It works pretty well, actually. So now I'm just looking at it, and I'm like, yeah, I need to let this dry. I need to let this dry because it's gonna drag when I go to dry brush. So if the paint is still wet and you go to dry brush, and I guess I went back in and stippled a little bit more of the chestnut, maybe. Yeah, it looks like chestnut. So if the paint is still wet when you go to dry brush, what it'll do is either smear or it will pull. So when you run the dry brush over the paint that's still wet, it'll rip the pigment off of the casting, which is something that you don't want. It'll actually ruin what you just did, right? So, you want to take your time, let it dry. I kind of push the envelope here because I'm trying to get this video done for you guys within one sitting real quick, so I can get this out. And a lot of people were asking to see how I do this. So and this is for beginners. I'm not using any of my Citadel paints. This is all apple barrel stuff. But to not be redundant, I'll jump back into to what we're gonna do here. So now this is the dust effect, right? And this first. So what I do is I go in with brown oxide, chestnut, light mocha. That's my process for dusting, right? Usually, on a lighter car like this, it's easier to see, but because we put rust on, it's kind of hard to see the brown, the darker colors. So I go in with a few swipes of this, and then I decide to just skip a little bit and go straight to the light mocha, just to show you guys what this is doing, because it is kind of hard to see the dry brushing effect with the dark color on the dark rust look. But basically, the idea here is to simulate dust and mud that was kicked up off of the tires, and just from like running off road and getting dirty, right? So the tires spin clockwise, and it would kick dirt up from the bottom up onto the side of the car, into the wheel wells, and up onto the fenders. And any dust coming from the front of the car is going to come up over the hood and hit the roof, and kind of trail off on the trunk. But you just basically, you take your paintbrush, you get the paint on there really good, and then you brush it off until there's basically nothing there, just trails on the paper towel, right? And then you test it out on a piece of the car that isn't so noticeable, to make sure that it's the right amount. And then you just go at it, like, and you'll see real quick, and you're about to see right here, the light mocha shows up really good. And you'll see what I'm talking about. And now I dab off the excess paint, and I go back to the paper towel. The camera's shaking, so I stabilize it. I get most of the paint off of my brush here, but you see that it still puts it down a little bit. So there's enough paint in there to trail, and you'll see right here, right? It starts to pick up on the raised areas. It starts to pick up on the edges, and it gives it that nice effect that we're looking for. You know, it looks like dust was kicked up. Now, would it kick up forward on the fenders like that? I don't know. But this is just for the purpose of this video. I want to show you guys what can be done with the cheapest of the cheap, right? You don't have to spend a ton of money. So, you know, you can do this on everything too. It doesn't have to be on the diecast cars. You know, you can use this effect on terrain pieces, airplanes. You know, I don't know about boats, but you know, you get it. You get it. So anyway, so we start off. I always start off low to high, right? I start off low to high. So it's always the dirt kicking up off the tires. That's the first thing that I do. I make sure that right behind those front wheels it has a nice splatter effect, right? And it usually travels up the doors. And then I'll head down to the back wheels and do the same thing. Now we turn to the front of the car where, you know, dirt and dust would have definitely collected on this car, especially if it's a off-road Gaslands type vehicle that doesn't get washed very often. It's always out and about. A lot of dust is going to get caught up on the front of this vehicle. So, you know, we want to make sure that we capitalize on that and make it pronounced in the front. And then this is basically just the other side. I replicate what I did on the on the right side of the car. Starting at the front wheels, we kick the dust back, travel up the door, around the front of the wheel well, and now we're at the back of the car where the back tires would have kicked up a lot of wet type material and kick it up onto the back rockers back there, the trunk pan, you know. And then I start to focus on the top of the car where, you know, just residual dirt, dust, you know, it just would catch on the top of this car and, you know, make it dirty, you know, just make it dirty. And you can go crazy with this, really. You could dry brush the whole thing if you really wanted to. This is live right here. I did this in under 20 minutes. So in under 20 minutes with less than $10, you can have a decent looking car. Now, I'm not saying this is the best job I've ever done, right? But for the purpose of this video, you take in the knowledge that I'm giving you, the materials that I bought to use to do this, and then you make it your own, right? I'm not telling you to go buy the book and do exactly what I'm doing here, but people have asked me to show my process, right? And this is how I started off. These were the first tools that I learned in my bag of tricks, and this is the basis of, you know, most of my work. Came from 50-cent Apple Barrel acrylic paints. Make sure you grab the matte acrylic paints, right? And dollar store brushes and everything that you see in this video here. You know, it's all how I learned, right? So basically, this is how we end up. You know, it's a less than 20-minute job, and you get a nice dust effect. You get a nice little rust effect. Is it completely believable? Probably not, but it doesn't look horrible, and it's something that you could put the car back together, clear it. You want to use rust. I use Rust-Oleum matte clear coat, right? Put a layer of that on there, maybe two. And, you know, put the car back together, and you got a tabletop ready Gaslands vehicle for that night or that day or whatever, you know, or you got something you could take some pictures of and, you know, feel good about. So basically, that's my process, guys. How to rust and dust for under $10 and, you know, achieve something that is presentable. Make it your own. I hope you enjoyed this, took some value from it. I'll catch you guys on the next one.